My girlfriend cheated while I was in the hospital. Her best friend told me the truth. I woke up from a life-changing surgery, but the real pain was just beginning. My name is Ethan, and I was 28 years old when my world was meticulously dismantled, piece by agonizing piece. It didn't start with a bang, but with the soft, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor and the dull, persistent throb in my leg. The accident, a stupid, preventable pile-up on the freeway, had left me with a shattered femur and a constellation of lesser injuries across my body. The surgery to piece me back together had been a success, the doctors said. I was lucky, they said. Lying there in the sterile white room, floating on a sea of prescribed bliss, I almost believed them. My girlfriend, Olivia, was there when the fog first lifted. Her hand, usually so warm and familiar, felt like a foreign object in mine. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, which kept darting towards the door, as if expecting someone more important to walk through it. She'd brush the hair from my forehead, her touch feather-light and impersonal, and tell me she was so glad I was okay. But the words were hollow, echoing in the cavernous space between us. She'd stay for 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, her phone buzzing on the bedside table like an irate insect. Each notification seemed to pull her further away from me, her attention fracturing with every glance. She'd make excuses about needing to run errands, to talk to the insurance adjusters, to pick up my prescriptions. They all sounded plausible, reasonable even. But as the days blurred into a monotonous cycle of pain medication and physical therapy, her visits grew shorter, her smiles more strained. The nurses, with their practiced, sympathetic gazes, would ask when Olivia was coming back, and I'd just shrug, a wave of cold loneliness washing over me. I was trapped in this bed, dependent on the one person who seemed to find my presence a burden. One evening she stood to leave, leaning down to kiss my cheek. As she pulled back, I saw it, a flicker of something in her expression. It wasn't pity or concern, it was relief. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips as she turned her back to me and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the beeping machines and the chilling realization that the woman I loved couldn't wait to be away from me. The days that followed were a study in silent suffering. My body was on the mend, the bone knitting together under the influence of titanium and time, but my mind was unraveling. The physical pain was a constant companion, a dull ache I could manage, but the emotional void Olivia left behind was a gaping wound. I found myself obsessing over her absences, replaying her fleeting visits in my mind, searching for clues I had missed. The nurses became my unwitting investigators, their casual comments painting a picture I didn't want to see. One mentioned she'd seen Olivia in the hospital parking lot, laughing in a car with a man I didn't recognize. Another commented on the expensive-looking designer bag Olivia carried, a far cry from the thrift store chic she usually preferred. I told myself they were mistaken, that their observations were misinterpretations. It was easier than facing the alternative. I tried calling her, my thumb hovering over her contact picture, a photo of us on a beach trip from a year ago, both of us sun-kissed and blissfully happy. But the calls went straight to voicemail. Her text replies were short, detached fragments. Busy, can't talk, later. Each word was a tiny needle prick on my already raw nerves. Then, one afternoon, after a particularly grueling physical therapy session that left me sweating and exhausted, I returned to my room to find it empty. Olivia had been and gone while I was away. On the bedside table, next to the lukewarm water she'd left me, was a small, silver object. It was an earring, a delicate hoop with a tiny, shimmering sapphire. It wasn't mine, and it certainly wasn't Olivia's, who had a well-known allergy to anything but gold or platinum. I picked it up, the cold metal a stark contrast to my feverish skin. It was a tangible piece of evidence, a silent accusation sitting in the palm of my hand. I didn't want to believe what it implied, but the seed of doubt that had been planted was now a thorny, invasive vine, wrapping itself around my heart. I squeezed my eyes shut, the earring clutched in my fist, and for the first time since the accident, I felt a pain that had nothing to do with my broken bones. It was the sharp, searing pain of betrayal. 3 days after I found the earring, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of hope and dread. I thought it might be Olivia, finally offering a real explanation. But the name on the screen, once I opened the message, was even more surprising. It was Maya, Olivia's best friend. I hadn't heard from her since the accident, which I'd thought was odd. The three of us had always been a tight-knit unit. The message was short and cryptic. "Ethan, it's Maya. I need to talk to you. It's about Olivia. Can I come to the hospital?" A cold knot formed in my stomach. This was it, the confirmation I had been dreading. I simply replied, "Yes." An hour later, Maya appeared at my door. She looked terrible, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She wouldn't meet my gaze, her hands twisting a strap of her purse in a nervous, repetitive motion. She didn't say a word as she walked in, simply pulling a chair up to my bed and sitting down. The silence in the room thick with unspoken words. I watched her, my own breath held tight in my chest. She seemed to be wrestling with something, a monumental internal battle playing out across her features. Finally, with a trembling hand, she pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling as she navigated to a specific image. She held it out to me, her arm extended as if the device weighed 1,000 pounds. Her eyes were finally locked on mine, filled with a devastating mixture of pity and guilt. I took the phone from her, my own hand shaking slightly. On the screen was a screenshot of an Instagram direct message conversation. The sender was unmistakably Olivia. The recipient was a man I didn't know, a handsome, smirking face in his profile picture. I began to read, and with each word, the world I thought I knew crumbled into dust. Olivia's messages were flirty, intimate, and cruel. She complained about being stuck at the hospital with the invalid, describing her visits as a total drag. She talked about the parties she was missing, the fun she was having, all while I was lying in a hospital bed. And then I saw it. A message from her to him sent just 2 nights ago. "I miss you. I can't wait until this is all over and I can finally be free." Free. The word echoed in my head, a death knell for our relationship. I looked up from the phone, my eyes burning with unshed tears. Maya was openly crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. The truth was out, raw and ugly, and it was more devastating than I had ever imagined. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. I slowly placed it on the bedside table, the screen still glowing with Olivia's betrayal. Maya sat across from me, a silent, weeping statue of remorse. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. I didn't feel anger, not yet. I felt a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. The beeping of the heart monitor, once a sign of life, now sounded like a countdown to the end of everything I had held dear. An hour passed, maybe 2. Maya had composed herself, whispering a strained, broken apology before leaving, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I was alone again, but this time the loneliness was different. It wasn't a void, it was a vacuum, sucking all the light and air from the room. I just stared at the ceiling, the earring from the other day still clutched in my other hand, its sharp edge digging into my palm. The physical pain in my leg was a distant echo, replaced by the all-consuming ache in my chest. Around dusk, the door to my room swung open. It was Olivia. She breezed in, carrying a get-well-soon balloon that bobbed cheerfully behind her. She was smiling, a bright, practiced smile that didn't waver until she saw my face. She stopped dead in her tracks, her cheerfulness faltering. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, my eyes devoid of any emotion. I slowly picked up Maya's phone from the bedside table and held it out to her, the screen displaying the damning conversation. I watched as her eyes scanned the words, her expression morphing from confusion to dawning horror, and finally to a cold, hard panic. Her face went white, then a blotchy red. She snatched the phone from my hand, her knuckles white. With a guttural cry of frustration and rage, she hurled the phone against the wall, where it shattered into a dozen pieces. She glared at me, her eyes shooting daggers, but there was no denial in them, only fury at being caught. Without a backward glance, she spun around and stormed out of the room, the balloon she'd brought trailing behind her like a ghost. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing in the sudden, deafening silence. I was left alone with the broken phone and the floating balloon, a pathetic, smiling testament to a life that was no longer mine. The days after Olivia's stormy exit were a blur of doctor's appointments and discharge paperwork. The hospital, once a prison, now felt like a fragile sanctuary. Outside those walls, the real world and my real problems were waiting. I was discharged on a Tuesday, my leg encased in a heavy, cumbersome brace. A taxi took me to the apartment Olivia and I had shared for the last 3 years. As I hobbled up the stairs, each step sending a jolt of pain through my body, I felt a sense of dread that far outweighed any physical discomfort. I pushed the key into the lock and opened the door. The scent of her perfume, a mix of vanilla and lavender, hit me like a physical blow. It was everywhere. It clung to the curtains, the sofa cushions, the very air I breathed. The apartment was exactly as we'd left it the day of the accident. Her favorite mug was still by the coffee maker, her throw blanket was draped over the armchair. Her life was intertwined with every fiber of this place, and now it all felt like a lie. I sank onto the sofa, the weight of my situation pressing down on me. I was a broken man in a broken home with a broken heart. I sat there for hours, just staring at the walls, the silence a roaring in my ears. I knew I couldn't stay like this, wallowing in my misery. I needed answers. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception. With a grim sense of purpose, I pushed myself up and, leaning heavily on my crutches, made my way to our bedroom. I started with her closet. Her clothes were still there, a vibrant collection of colors and fabrics that I now saw as a collection of costumes. I began to pull them from the hangers, piling them on the bed. Then I saw it. Tucked away in the back of the closet was a shoebox I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were things I knew I hadn't given her. A diamond tennis bracelet, a pair of designer heels, receipts from expensive restaurants, dates that coincided with my hospital stay. And at the bottom of the box, a small folded note. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was from him. "My beautiful Liv," it read, "thank you for last night. I can't stop thinking about you. Soon, we won't have to hide anymore. A. Just a single initial, but it was enough. It was the final nail in the coffin. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, and for the first time, I allowed myself to break. The tears came, hot and furious, a torrent of grief for a future that was never going to happen. I must have sat on the floor of that closet for an eternity, the note clutched in my hand, the physical pain in my leg a dull throb compared to the agony in my soul. Eventually, I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to move. I had to do something. I slowly, painstakingly packed everything from the shoebox back inside. Then I started packing her clothes. It was a surreal, heartbreaking task. Each garment held a memory. The dress she wore on our first anniversary, the sweater she'd stolen from me, the t-shirt from a concert we went to together. I folded them mechanically, my mind a blank slate, and placed them in cardboard boxes I found in the kitchen. As I worked, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya. "Are you okay? I've been worried sick." I stared at her message, a flicker of something other than despair sparking within me. Gratitude. She had risked her lifelong friendship with Olivia to tell me the truth. She was the only person who seemed to care. I replied, "I'm not okay, but I will be." A moment later, she wrote back, "I'm coming over." True to her word, Maya arrived half an hour later. She took in the scene, me on the couch, my leg propped up, the boxes stacked around the room, and her face crumpled. She didn't say a word, just came and sat beside me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she began to talk. She told me everything. About the other man, a wealthy, older colleague of Olivia's. About how Olivia had been drawn in by the glamour and the attention. About how Olivia had complained to her about feeling stuck with me. About how my accident had complicated her plans. Maya told me she had argued with Olivia, had begged her to end it, to be there for me. But Olivia had been blinded by the excitement of her secret life. As Maya spoke, the last pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. My anger, which had been simmering beneath the surface, began to cool, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor, and I was done being lied to. Maya helped me pack, her presence a quiet, steady strength. Together, we sealed the last box, containing the remnants of a life built on lies. It was over. Or so I thought. As I was taping the box shut, something slipped from behind the tape. It was a small folded piece of paper, different from the note in the shoebox. I unfolded it. It was a receipt from a pawn shop, and the item listed on the receipt was my grandfather's watch, the one I thought I'd lost in the accident, the one Olivia had promised me she'd look for. She hadn't lost it. She had sold it. And below the item description, scrawled in Olivia's handwriting, were two words: his payment. The world tilted on its axis. His payment. The two words screamed at me from the crumpled receipt. This wasn't just an affair. This was a transaction. My grandfather's watch, the only heirloom I had, a symbol of my family's history, sold to pay for something? But what? A wave of nausea washed over me. Was she paying him off? Was he blackmailing her? Or was this something even more twisted? The betrayal had reached a new, unimaginable depth. I showed the receipt to Maya. Her eyes widened in shock and disgust. She put a hand over her mouth, her face pale. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, This is so much worse than I thought." We sat in stunned silence, the implications of the receipt hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. The plan, which had been to simply pack her things and move on, now felt inadequate. I needed answers. I needed to confront her, not just about the affair, but about this, about the watch. The next day, I called Olivia. I didn't mention the receipt or the affair. I just told her that her things were packed and that she needed to come and get them. My voice was flat, emotionless. She agreed, her tone wary. That evening, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Maya, who had refused to leave my side, squeezed my arm in a gesture of support. I hobbled to the door and opened it. Olivia was standing there, but she wasn't alone. Beside her was a man, tall and impeccably dressed. This had to be him. This was A. His eyes swept over me, a flicker of contempt in their depths, before he masked it with a polite, disinterested smile. Olivia looked nervous, her eyes darting between me and the man. I stepped aside, gesturing to the boxes in the living room. "Your things are here," I said, my voice cold. I didn't invite them in. I just stood there, a sentinel at the door, my crutches under my arms. As Olivia and the man started to load the boxes into their car, I walked over to the last box, the one with her clothes. I reached inside and pulled out the shoebox. I opened it and showed it to him. "I believe these are from you," I said, my gaze locked on his. His smug smile faltered. Then I pulled out the pawn shop receipt. "And I believe this belongs to me," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I looked from his face to Olivia's. She looked terrified, her face ashen. The man's expression changed from smugness to panic. He looked at Olivia, his eyes hard. "You told me you handled this," he hissed, his voice low enough that only the three of us could hear. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. He wasn't just her lover. He was her accomplice. She hadn't been selling the watch to pay him. She had been selling my things to fund their life together. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lash out. I just looked at the two of them, standing there amidst the wreckage of my life, and I felt nothing but a cold, clear certainty. They were pathetic. I took a step back, into my apartment. "Get out," I said, "and don't ever come back." I closed the door, shutting them out of my life for good. I leaned against the door, my body trembling, not from weakness, but from the sheer force of my own liberation. It was over, truly over. The silence in the apartment was absolute. It was a clean, pure silence, free of lies and secrets. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my leg and a sharper one in my heart, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was just a scar, a reminder of a battle I had survived. The weeks that followed were a slow, steady climb back to normalcy. I focused on my physical therapy, pushing myself harder with each session, finding strength in the burn of my muscles. I started to reclaim the apartment, packing away the last of Olivia's things, painting the walls a new color, buying new furniture. It was my space now, truly mine. Maya was a constant presence, her friendship a lifeline. We'd go for walks in the park, her arm linked with mine as I hobbled along on my crutches. We'd talk for hours, not about Olivia, but about everything else, about books and movies and our hopes for the future. She was helping me rebuild my world, one brick at a time. One sunny afternoon, a few months after I'd been discharged from the hospital, I was sitting on a bench in the park, watching the world go by. My leg was strong now, the brace gone. I was just a guy in a park, enjoying the warmth of the sun on my face. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya. It was a picture of a puppy, a tiny golden retriever with floppy ears and big brown eyes. The caption below it read, "Thinking we might need a little more chaos in our lives. What do you think?" I looked at the picture, and for the first time in a long time, a genuine, unburdened smile spread across my face. I typed back a single word. Yes. I put my phone away and leaned my head back, closing my eyes and soaking in the warmth. The betrayal had shattered my world, but from the pieces, I had built something new, something stronger, something real. The future was uncertain, a vast, uncharted territory. But as I sat there in the park, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was ready for it. I was Ethan. I was 28 years old, and I was finally, truly free.